My name is Andy Larkin, and this is my ABE 316 final project. The first thing we should do before I go into my problem example is say the difference between the analytical method and the numerical method. The analytical method is the one that we're most familiar with, where we have an equation and we just solve it to get an answer. Kind of like this problem down below. The difference between that and the numerical method is that the numerical method doesn't really give us an exact answer, only an approximation of an answer. Usually it can get pretty close, but there are other times where it doesn't really get as close. Example, this is down below. We're trying to find the x-intercept of the same equation, but it's going through various stages to try to get closer and closer to a correct guess. This one actually gets the correct answer after a bit of time. Another difference is that the analytical method isn't always available, since we don't always have the exact necessary equations to find the answer, while the numerical method can get it's very available most of the time. The analytical method, we need a well-defined problem, so we basically need a full equation. And so we need to know exactly what we need to solve and what exactly needs to be solved for. Well, the numerical method, we don't need that intense knowledge of the problem, just a basic understanding of the problem, what we need to solve for, and generally how we get closer to an answer. The analytical method should really be used when we have the equations present and we can find what needs to be solved for easily, like the equation below. We know what to solve for, x. We know how to solve it just by putting in 0, solving for x. The numerical method should be used when we have bigger problems and a lot of factors that interact with each other in quite a few different ways. We saw a few problems in class where we had a lot of things interacting with other variables, and so finding one specific variable, the max or min of it, is a bit harder. The method that I'm going to talk about today is the evolutionary method. As it says here, it's just random guesses, and we get closer and closer based on what the best guesses are. On the right here, we have a bit of demonstration, a very simplistic version of how evolution solves it. We have an initial guess, a few random answers to the guess. We choose the best ones, get it a bit more random, choose the best ones, more random, etc. Down here in the bottom left, we have an example of this in action with a car racing game. Looks like if you touch the wall, then the car is out. So it is looking at the cars that are going the furthest, and as you can see, as the generations go up, more and more cars follow suit. So it's almost like this example here. It's choosing the best ones and doing small changes based on that to go in the next further generations. Evolution is basically for when we have discontinuous functions. So if there's any if statements, or if there's a max and min that we're trying to go for instead of an exact solution. There are definitely pros and cons to evolutionary as well. Some of the pros: solving problems more like a human than a computer does. We can solve more abstract problems, ones that don't have single solutions that we're looking for. And they're not constrained by mathematical equations. Theoretically, all problems could have mathematical equations backed to them, but in most modern day life, things are so complex that to find the mathematical equations that we would need to solve everything is absurdly big and complicated and just really too much effort to really do. But it's not perfect either. The cons: it's not guaranteed to give a solution. It's just doing random guesses, and random guesses don't always work. Cons: it gets too confused if the scope of the project is too large. We can see this in this example here with the maze. Every time it gets to one of these points, it has to make a decision of to go left, right, forward, backward. And if you start from any point to get towards the exit, you have to make a lot of correct guesses of where to go and where not to go. And so it can kind of get confused if it has too large of a problem. And another big con is that it's hard to find a solution if it has a binary answer, yes or no. So say, for example, you start at this point right here in the center, and you go till you get a wall. That's either a yes, you've made it out, or no, you've hit a wall. So it has a hard time trying to figure out if it's getting closer or not to the solution. Because let's say we start in the middle, do you go here to the top or here to the middle? which one is closer to the exit, it doesn't know. So it doesn't know which one it should prefer more. And it has to keep going until it eventually stumbles into the correct solution, going up here, 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 so on and so forth, until it hits this solution exit here. This little looped gift isn't exactly doing evolutionary process, but I think it's a good explanation of what evolutionary process is trying to do. There are also different settings that we can use in evolutionary solver in Excel that can help us kind of mitigate some of the cons as before. The objective set function, like we've looked at before, we find a cell and we're trying to either get it a maximum, minimum, or value. The variables that we're changing, so the things that we're allowing to change and kind of become randomized, see if we can get it closer to this objective function. Various constraints that we can add to make the changing cells behave in specific ways. These ones are just general for all the methods, GRG, nonlinear, linear, or evolutionary. But the ones on the right are only for evolutionary. We have convergence, which is the percent difference the last 99% of trials have to be before it can quit. The smaller this is, the closer it has to get to the correct answer before it's allowed to stop. Then we have the mutation rate, a number that can be between 1 and 0. This is how long it takes, or rather, the randomness in the evolutionary factor itself. If you have a high mutation rate, there's a greater chance that it changes a number in it, and it'll take more time to get to the correct answer. An example of this would be back to our maze problem. A high mutation rate would mean going to a changing path instead of following a continuous path. So let's say you start here, and it knows to go here, here, and here, and it knows that that is a correct solution. A higher mutation rate would it would rather go to various different paths instead of following this rate verbatim. The population size is the number of points that each decision variable has to maintain. So the higher the population size, the more different points there are that it's keeping track of at a time. So it can find the solution a bit faster if you have a lot of them, because it's running a lot of simulations at once. But also, if it runs a lot of simulations at once, it will take longer in some regards if you have too many, because it's keeping track of too many things at the same time. A random seed is basically just a string of random numbers that it uses to make the random decisions. If you put the same random seed number, it'll do the exact same solution every time, because it's not really random at that point using the same seed, because it's using the same process of decision making every time. So by leaving this blank, you're creating a new series, so thereby making it kind of random. The maximum time without improvement is kind of exactly as it sounds like. It's how long it'll go. If it doesn't find improvement, it'll just stop. For my problem, that's rather big, so 900 seconds or 15 minutes. Speaking of my problem, I decided to do the Einstein's 5-house riddle. You may be familiar with it if you watch the TED Ed Riddle series, or if not, I have a brief explanation here. There are 5 houses in a row next to each other. Each house has different colored walls, different nationality of resident, different pet, brand of cigar, different favorite drink. The only things are known are these 15 rules over here, and what you're trying to figure out is who owns the goldfish and where do they live. And so we can see here that there are 15 rules. Very few of them actually say anything that we can immediately use. Like, the man living in the center house drinks milk. All right, so we instantly know that. A majority of them are like, the Swede has a dog. So it's just relationships between 2 different points. So now let's go to the Excel page, and we can show you how I set it up. First, I made the little sections for wall color, nationality, cigar brand, beverage, and animals, and all based on the houses. I also have a small table here where it's just the sum of everything here. So we're wanting all of these to be 1. One house has 1 wall color, and that's final. We have the average house occupancy here, which is just the average of all these. we want this to be 1 because every house should have 1 of everything. And then the rules I have implemented over here to the right. So those are basically set up by having checks. So the Brit, it lives at the same house with the red walls, so it checks the Brit, matching, and matching with the red walls. So what you can see here, the red walls, if I put that a 1, you can see, or if I choose that in the Brit, it's the difference is 0, and we want the difference to be 0. And this column here checks the difference between what it actually is versus what we want, and we want all of these to be 0. So the sum here should be 0. Now I have the initial statements set up, or actually there are 3 of them that we know for certain based off of the rules. That is that the center house has a person who drinks milk, so we have that here. The Norwegian lives in the first house, we have that here. The Norwegian lives next to the blue house wall, or the blue walled house. And because the Norwegian is in the first house, the blue walls have to be in the second house. Beyond that, we can't really derive anything from these rules. But to find a good evolutionary process, we need some sort of initial guess. So I have an initial guess here. Besides the 3 that I showed before, everything else is just randomized. We have everything being 1, which is good. And then we have the different checks here. The Brit and lives at the same house as the red walls. In reality, right here, the check is just 1. So the red house wall and the Brit is 1 house apart. We want it to be 0. The difference is 1. That's bad. And so we sum up all of the differences here. And when we open up Solver, this is the thing that we're trying to minimize or set a value of 0. The different constraints that I have set up is that all of these average house occupancies are 1. All of the wall colors, nationalities, etc., all the things are binary. And that all of the constraints here, all the checks should be equal to their wants. And I do evolutionary. My options for evolutionary, the convergence is rather low since it's a binary effect. It either is or it isn't. The answer is, I mean. It either is the correct answer or is not the correct answer. The mutation rate I have decently high because there is no way that it can be, if it'll know if it's on the right track or not. So the higher mutation chance, the better it has to randomly stumble upon the correct answer. Population size is a decent amount, about 2,000. Adding another power of 10 or so will just have it slow down quite a bit. Random C is just 0, and maximum time without improvement was 15. It should be 900 because it counts in seconds. I tried it with 15 minutes, and because the parameters are so random and that it can't really try to solve it anyway besides guessing, it would take probably about an hour for it to solve it eventually. But when it does, the correct answer has listed out here. As you can see, the average house occupancy is 1. All the checks are correlated with what they want, so the differences are all 0. And we can see that fish is in house 4, which is the same house that lives the German. And that is the actual correct answer for the riddle. And with that, I believe that should end my presentation. Thank you.